be sewing the Andi skirt. This is my very latest pattern release and I am so excited to bring it to the sewing community. The Andi skirt is an A-frame skirt that's full of volume. The pattern comes with two different views. View A is a simple two-paneled skirt which is classic and timeless, so it has a front panel and a back panel. For view B, it is actually a four-panel skirt, so it means it has two front panels and two back panels, and each of those seams is finished with a top stitching detail, which is just beautiful. Both of the views are finished with a really nice wide hem, view B's being just a little bit wider. And both of the views also have the option between two waistbands. So either the traditional waistband, which is a traditional front and an elastic back, or the elastic waistband, which is a full elastic waistband around the front and the back. So both views, you have the option of choosing either of those waistbands. So the pattern instructions that are provided with the pattern are comprehensive. There's so much information in there. So please, before you start sewing your Andi skirt, make sure you read through all of that information because it's all valuable and it's all going to help you in your experience sewing the Andi skirt. The things that the instructions cover are pattern notes, the different views, selecting a size, making a length adjustment. So this pattern was first based on my body and my specific height. So I am 5'3". If you are not that, you are going to have to either extend or shorten the skirt. So the instructions go through how to make that length adjustment if you need to. The supplies you'll need, fabric recommendation, the fabric yield, the elastic yield, printing and assembling, cutting into the fabric, your print at home layout if you're using the print at home format, checklists, sewing glossary, and the instructions. Even if you're using this video to sew along to, I would still recommend that you go and read through all of the information that is provided in the instructions. I'm not going to go through all of that information in this video because it's there in the instructions, but I do want to just highlight and reiterate some of the important notes from the instructions. Okay, firstly, so the pattern comes in three different formats. It comes as a print at home format, a large format or A0, and projector format. So you can choose which one works best for you. Print at home is you're going to actually print it at home using your own printer, and it's compatible with A4 or US letter. The other option is the large format, so you will be getting that printed for you in A0 size, or using a projector if that is something that you have and like to do. Okay, I want to make a note here. If you are printing A0 or the large format, which is primarily what I do not, I highly recommend that you do not get it printed with a copy shop. Get it printed with someone who specifically prints sewing patterns. This is for a number of reasons. Number one, so much more affordable. I know in Australia, getting an A0 print at a copy shop is like $40 for one page. So you can see like it adds up really quickly. If you're getting 2 or 3 pages printed, it's getting very expensive. But with someone like I get mine printed with Kylie in the machine. I know Blackbird Fabrics also does it, and there's many others out there. But Kylie in the machine, she does it, she prints worldwide, so she's an option for anyone. The other reason is that the businesses that actually print sewing patterns have the PDF readers that allow you to select and deselect size layers. And so a copy shop isn't going to be able to do that for you. So you're going to have to get all of the sizes printed in one, which is fine. But if you would like to just get your size printed, which just ends up being easier when you're cutting it out, they're going to be able to do that. So you can request a size and have that printed. The third reason is that they will actually print it to the correct scale and check it for you. So I know mine always get printed, they check the measurement square on there and will sign it off if it's the correct scale. So way better option to get it printed with someone who actually specifically prints sewing patterns than a copy shop. Okay, this is an important note, and it's in the instructions, it's on the pattern pieces, but I just want to reiterate. Both view A and view B are provided in the same pattern. I've done this to save on paper waste, and that there's less effort and cost and all of that for you guys. What this means is that there will be two center edges provided on the pattern piece, and they are annotated, so you'll see them there. The very outer edge is view B, and that is labeled. It says view B, cut your pieces mirrored. And then the next line is view A, and it says cut your pieces on the fold. So if you're wanting to sew view B, you just use the panel piece as it is and cut out your pieces on the mirrored. If you're wanting to sew view A, all you need to do is just fold the pattern piece at that center line so it aligns with the view A center line, and you can continue to cut out your pattern. So yeah, when you're cutting out your pattern piece, just remember, even if you have printed it in order to sew view A, I would still cut out the full panel piece including the view B center line, because then you have it for both options if you want it. And if you're sewing view A, you just need to fold that center seam over. Okay, the other note I want to make is that the fabric yield provided in the instructions is based on a roll width of 140 centimeters. If you are sewing view A where your panel is cut on the fold, sizes H and larger get too wide to be able to cut your view A panel on the fold on a 140 centimeter width roll. So these are the two options. If you are going to use that roll width of 140 centimeters, you can actually, what you'll need to do is you won't be able to cut your pieces on the fold, but you can cut them mirrored and then just add them, like just sew them together down that center seam. So what you can actually do is use the view B line, which is the very outer edge of the panel, and that's going to give you the seam allowance to do a French seam at that point. If you're doing view A, you're not going to be top stitching it, but yeah, that will give you the seam allowance to be able to join those two panels together. The other option is that you use a roll width that is wide enough for you to fit your pattern piece on there. And you can also use thrifted materials, bed sheets. I know that you can get like roll widths that are like extra wide. So yeah, just wanted to make a note of that because if you're at that size, you will have to make that decision. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fabric. So the skirt is very, very versatile when it comes to fabrics. I actually designed it to use a more medium weight structured fabric, but it works really beautifully with both lightweight fabrics and medium weight fabrics. I've also even sewn it with a heavyweight fabric, though I have it, my official recommendation is lightweight to medium weight fabrics, because with the heavyweight, I've done a denim, and the place where it gets challenging is the waistband, just because there's so much fabric. It works, but yeah, my official recommendation is light to medium weight. The skirt is going to take on a different look and feel depending on what fabric you choose. So if you're going to choose a lightweight, flowy, drapey fabric, you're going to get a really flowy, drapey skirt. And if you are choosing something that's still lightweight but more of a structured drape, like a cotton poplin, your skirt's going to take on a different look, and both are beautiful. Just keep that in mind when you're choosing your fabric. The skirt can also be sewn using a medium weight fabric for the cooler months. Okay, the pattern rating. So the pattern is rated a confident beginner. This pattern includes some sewing techniques that are a little bit more elevated or advanced. Those techniques include French seams, French seam pockets, a separate waistband, and a hem facing. So that is why I have rated this as a confident beginner. I would definitely sew this once you have a few other beginner projects under your belt. But in saying that, these are such good techniques to learn. So I really encourage you, if you're a beginner, to learn these techniques, because they're really often, when you're new to sewing, You start out with the basics and that's good. May not have invested into an overlocker yet. And these are techniques that are going to give you a really high quality garment finish without needing an overlocker. So yeah, I do really encourage you to learn these techniques. Don't be intimidated by it. Give it a go. And I'm going to share some beginner tips that can kind of help you along the way. My first tip is to go slow. Give yourself time to sew this pattern and go through each of the steps really slowly and intentionally, and give each step care, and you will be fine. Use the instructions as well as referencing this video if you need it. Some people like to sew using the instructions, some people prefer a visual aid, so they're both here for you. Use both of them if you need them. My next tip is be specific with your seam allowances. Don't kind of guess them. Use the little measurements that are on your sewing machine to guide you. And yeah, because this pattern has like a separate hem facing and a separate waistband, you need to be specific with the seam allowances. So I just say don't kind of cruise through those, like actually make sure that you're sewing the seam allowances correctly. And my last two tips is, one, this is just a general tip for sewing if you're a beginner, but prepare your fabric properly. So make sure, I used to skip on this, make sure that you are pre-washing your fabrics, drying them and ironing them before you use them. Make sure that when you're cutting out your panels, the fabric is ironed, it's pressed, it's crisp, it's ready to go. It is going to completely change the end result of your garment. If you don't pre-wash your fabric, your garment actually may look perfect once it's sewn up, but as soon as you wash it, it's going to shrink, there's going to be bubbling in the seams, it's just not going to be ideal. So remember, don't skip on it, pre-wash your fabric, dry it and press it. On that, pressing, don't skip pressing. I say it through the instructions, so just remember to always press. I press probably way more than I need to. I press almost after everything that I do, but it's so important. This is going to change the quality of your garments, I promise. If you have been skipping out on pressing, one of my top tips to beginners is always press. After everything that you do, press your seams, press whatever it is. If the instructions tell you to press, don't skip it, press. Okay, those are all my tips if you're a beginner going into this pattern, to help you out and to set you up for a win. Yeah, I'm so delighted that you guys are here. I'm so delighted to bring this pattern to the sewing community. So let's get into sewing. Okay, so if you are using the large format A0 pattern like I am here, you will see that the main skirt panel is provided in two different pieces. So all you need to do is just cut out those two pieces and stick them together like I'm doing right here. The pattern pieces are annotated, so they will say that they're skirt panel A and skirt panel B and tell you where to stick them together. For this Andi skirt tutorial, I am sewing view B and I'm using this lightweight denim, and I've just chosen a matching thread and a contrasting top stitching thread. If you are sewing view B and you're doing top stitching, then you will need to choose a top stitching thread, and just make sure when you're using this top stitching thread, you're still using an all-purpose thread in your bobbin. Okay, go ahead and cut out your pattern pieces. You can secure your pattern in place by either using paperweights of any sort. As you can see, I'm just using some things I have lying around, or you can actually pin your pattern piece to your fabric. Yeah, you can go ahead and cut this out, and just remember to be specific and accurate when you're cutting these out. Okay, I am just loading in my all-purpose threads to begin sewing, and then I will switch out my top thread to a top stitching thread whenever that is necessary. So throughout this tutorial, just remember to do that, and then to sub in your all-purpose thread when you're not top stitching. To begin, we want to stay stitch the top and bottom edges of the main skirt panels and of the hem facing panels, and we do this 1/4 inch from the edge. If you are sewing the traditional waistband, then we want to apply some interfacing to that waistband. If you are sewing the elastic waistband, then you can just skip this step. If you are sewing the traditional waistband, you can cut the interfacing using the traditional waistband panel, and then what you'll want to do is trim the interfacing by 3/8 of an inch on all sides, and then center that interfacing to the fabric panel. This means that the interfacing won't actually be in your seams, and it will reduce any bulk in the seams. Apply the interfacing to the wrong side of your traditional waistband. And when I apply the interfacing, I just use a piece of scrap fabric over the top when I'm pressing, and this just ensures that I don't get any of that adhesive from the interfacing transferring onto my iron. Okay, there we have it. So that is the front piece of the traditional waistband that is fully prepared for later. So you can just place that aside for now. Preparing view B. So if you are sewing view A, you can skip these steps, but if you are sewing view B, then follow along. We are going to be using French seams to attach our front panels together and our back panels together. If you haven't done a French seam, then I'm about to walk you through those steps. Locate the view B skirt panels and place 2 mirrored corresponding skirt panels together with the wrong sides facing together. Align the center edges of these panels from the waist all the way down to the ankle and pin in place. Using a straight stitch, sew down that center seam with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn these together, you will want to trim away any threads or frayed edges, and this just means that your French seam is going to be really clean and there's going to be none of these kind of peeking through the next seam that we sew. Press the seam flat down the middle. This step just ensures a really, really nice, neat, crisp French seam. So once you've pressed down that center edge, you want to now flip the panel over so that the right sides are facing together and press down this seam again. Once you've pressed this seam, then use some clips or pins to secure this in place. Using a straight stitch, you want to sew down this center seam again, this time with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this will encase the previous seam and you won't be able to see the raw edge anymore. So you will have a really, really beautiful finish on the outside as well as in the inside. And this is a French seam. So if you've never sewn a French seam before, congratulations, you now have this beautiful technique up your sleeve, and it is what we will be using for the rest of the skirt. Press the seam to one side from the wrong side of your panel, and then press again from the right side. Okay, so now we're going to switch our thread over to our top stitching thread, and we will top stitch down that center seam. We're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the seam, and then 3/8 of an inch from the seam. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you are catching the seam underneath. So make sure that you're top stitching on the side of the seam that you pressed the seam allowance towards. And then you just want to repeat all of these steps again to prepare the other 2 mirrored skirt panels. Okay, sewing the French seam pockets to the skirt. This is probably the most challenging part of the skirt, but we're going to walk through it now and you're going to end up with a really, really beautiful high quality result pocket. So in these steps, the first thing we'll be doing is we will be sewing the pockets to the front skirt panel using French seams. And after this, you will attach the back skirt panel to the front skirt panel. Just a little note, the seam allowances for the French seams of the skirt and the French seams of the pockets are different. So be sure to listen, read the instructions, and just follow that carefully. And to illustrate how to sew the French seam pockets as clearly as possible, I've chosen to use different fabrics for the front pockets to the back pockets. So in the video tutorial, the front pockets are being sewn out of the denim fabric and the back pockets are being sewn out of the gingham fabric. Okay, so let's locate the front pocket panels. You probably already did this when you cut out your pattern pieces, but if you haven't, you will need to transfer the pocket notches onto the two front pockets on the wrong side of the pockets. On the wrong side of the front pockets, draw two lines 7/8 of an inch wide at the notches. So you're basically just extending those notches that you already have to be 7/8 of an inch wide. Once you've done this, you want to draw a vertical line connecting these notches. Okay, now you want to lay the front pocket onto your corresponding front skirt panel, aligning the notches with right sides facing. Sew along the lines that you drew on the pocket. You'll be sewing through the pocket and the skirt. Cut away this rectangle, leaving a scant 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This just means just a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you want to snip into the corners to the stitch line, but not beyond the stitch line. The closer that you snip into the corners, the cleaner of a result you will have. Fold the front pocket over so the wrong side of the pocket is now facing the wrong side of the front skirt panel, and give this a really nice steamy press in place. Pressing the pocket is what is going to give you a really clean French seam pocket, so don't skip the pressing in any of these steps. It's really, really important. Okay, now we want to edge stitch down the pocket opening 1/8 of an inch from the edge on the right side of the front skirt panel. So flip your skirt panel to be right side up and edge stitch from the top of that rectangular opening to the bottom of the rectangular opening 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Lay the front skirt panel down with the wrong side facing up and locate the corresponding back pocket panel. Place the corresponding back pocket behind the front pocket with the wrong sides facing. So the wrong side of your front pocket should be facing the wrong side of your back pocket, and the back pocket will be sandwiched in between the front pocket and the skirt panel. Pin the pockets together around the outer pocket edge. Okay, this might feel strange, but trust the process. When I first did this, it also felt strange, but it is correct. So just continue with the step. You're doing the right thing. You just want to align the outer edges of the two pockets and pin them together. It might feel a little bit awkward, and it does, so you're not doing it wrong. Just trust the process. Sew the pockets together around this outer pocket edge with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And just a note, you are only sewing the pockets here. You're not sewing anything to the skirt, you're just sewing the two pockets together. Flip the pocket inside out so the wrong sides of the pocket are now facing out, and press. A really, really good steamy press until everything is sitting really nicely in place. Pin the outer edge of the pocket together again. Sew around the outer pocket edge once again, this time with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you don't have to, but I really like to give the pocket another press after I do this, just so that everything is sitting really neatly in place. And then you're going to locate the back skirt panel. So lay the front skirt panel with the pocket attached down with the wrong side facing up, and then you want to lay the corresponding back skirt panel over that front skirt panel with the wrong side facing down. So the wrong sides of the skirt should be facing. Align the side edges and pin in place. Sew down this side seam with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn these together, you will want to trim away any threads or frayed edges And this just means that your French seam is going to be really clean and there's going to be none of these kind of peeking through the next seam that we sew. Press the seam flat down the center and be sure that the pocket is laying behind the front skirt panel when you do this. Once you've pressed down the center, you want to fold the skirt so that the right sides are facing together and press down this side seam again and pin in place. Sew down this side seam with 1/2 inch seam allowance. When you do this, you want to make sure that you don't enclose the pocket opening. So the way that I like to do this is to sew the skirt seam with the 1/2 inch seam allowance, but once you reach where the pocket portion is, just slow right down and you will actually see that you can see and feel that pocket opening underneath your skirt panel. And what you want to do is that you want to use that as a guide to make sure that you're sewing as close to the pocket opening as possible without sewing over that pocket opening and enclosing it. So yeah, that's my tip to help you get a really clean finish on that pocket, is to just make sure that you slow down and you feel that opening and sew according to that. And then you want to press this seam towards the back skirt panel. If you're sewing view B, you will want to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the seam and then 3/8 of an inch from the seam, making sure that you are catching the seam underneath. And when you do this, make sure that your pocket is behind the front skirt panel so you don't catch it in your top stitching. If you're sewing view A, then you can disregard this step because you won't be top stitching. Repeat all of the pocket steps with the remaining pockets and skirt panels. Once you've reached this portion, I just want to say congratulations, you have completed the most challenging part of the skirt construction, which was the French seam pockets, so well done. And we're going to move on now to our hem facing. Locate your hem facing panels and lay them over each other with the right sides facing and pin those side edges together. Using a straight stitch, sew the side seams together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you've done this, you want to press those seams flat down the center. Press the top edge of the hem facing in towards the wrong side by 1/2 inch. And this is a preparation step that is going to make a future step a lot easier. Okay, now we're going to attach the hem facing to the skirt panel, and you want the right side of the hem facing and the right side of the skirt to be facing each other. And you want to align the raw edge of the hem facing, so the edge that we didn't press over by 1/2 inch, with the raw edge of the skirt. You'll also want to align the side seams of the skirt to the side seams of the hem facing. So once you've aligned and pinned those side seams together, then you can continue around the rest of the skirt, pinning the hem facing to the skirt. Using a straight stitch, sew together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance towards the hem facing, and we're going to understitch the seam allowance to the hem facing. And this just means that we're sewing that seam allowance to the hem facing using a straight stitch, and we're going to sew close to the edge of the hem facing, so about 1/8 of an inch. Fold the hem facing in towards the wrong side of the skirt and give that a really good press. This is also where we're going to be really thankful that we previously pressed that raw edge in by 1/2 inch, because now it is just prepared and ready to go. So we're going to work our way around that hem facing and pin that top edge in place. How I like to do it is to pin those side seams in place first and then work my way around. I like to use a lot of pins at this step, and I like to place those pins along that hem facing, aligning horizontally with it, and I pin pretty much exactly where I want to sew. Then that's going to provide a really good guide of where to sew. Flip the skirt over and top stitch the hem facing in place, being sure that the top edge is still folded in by 1/2 inch. Give this hem facing a final press. Now we are moving on to our waistband. If you are sewing the elastic waistband, then we are going to go through those steps now. And if you're sewing the traditional waistband, you can skip forward to that part of the tutorial. Locate the elastic waistband panels and lay them over each other with the right sides facing. Pin the side edges together and using a straight stitch, sew the side seams together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press this seam flat down the center. Press the top edge of the waistband towards the wrong side by 3/8 inch, then press the bottom edge of the waistband towards the wrong side by 3/8 inch again. Press the waistband in half now, and this is going to give us a center guideline that's just going to make future steps of attaching the waistband cleaner and easier. Unfold the top edge of the waistband and align this raw edge with the top raw edge of the skirt. The right side of the waistband should be facing the wrong side of the skirt. Pin in place. Using a straight stitch, sew together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press this seam allowance towards the waistband. Fold the waistband over towards the right side of the skirt. So that center guideline that we previously pressed is going to help you in this step. And now the edge of the waistband that you were folding over has already been folded in by 1/2 inch. So you want to align this previously folded edge of the waistband so it sits just over the stitch line that you've just previously sewn. You don't want that stitch line to be visible from the front, so you want the waistband to just slightly cover it. So when you're doing this step, just take your time and make sure that it's all aligning properly, it's covering that stitch line, and pin it in place. Starting at one of the side seams, using a straight stitch, sew the waistband in place as close to the edge as possible. Really take your time here, take it slow, make sure that this stitch is really neat. The closer you get that stitch to the edge of your waistband panel, the neatest it's gonna look. So yeah, I really find that just taking your time in this step is gonna give you a really good result. If you would like to use your top stitching thread at this point, you are welcome to. I actually prefer not to. I prefer just to use my all-purpose thread for this step. So you're going to sew starting at one side seam the whole way around the skirt until you return to that side seam, and you're going to stop about 2 inches before you reach it. So you want there to be about a 2-inch opening that you're able to thread some elastic through. Okay, locate your elastic and attach whatever tool you like to use to thread elastic through casings with. At the moment, I really like using a bobby pin, so that's what I'm doing in this tutorial. Thread the elastic through the opening and all around the waistband casing until you reach the opening again. Here's a tip. When you're threading the elastic through the casing, You can also secure one end of the elastic in place with a safety pin so that you don't lose it, so it doesn't accidentally slip into the casing and then you have to start again. So once you have reached that opening again, you can just pull that elastic out a little bit and place one end of the elastic over the other and sew it together using a zigzag stitch. And you want to just make sure that your elastic isn't twisted. There's nothing worse than having a twisted elastic in your casing. This is also a good time to try on your skirt and just make sure that that elastic is fitting as you desire. The elastic still will expand and stretch a little bit with top stitching, so keep that in mind. You can now sew that 2-inch opening closed using a straight stitch. If you're not top stitching the waistband, then you have completed your skirt and congratulations. If you are top stitching the waistband, then I recommend one of these two options. One would be top stitching 1/4 of an inch from the top and 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the waistband. The second option is to top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the top and 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the waistband, and then additionally top stitching along the center of the waistband. When you're top stitching the waistband, you need to stretch that elastic out when top stitching so that you don't lose the elastic nature of the waistband. And what I like to do is just before I begin my stitching on the elastic, I just make sure that the elastic and fabric is evenly distributed, and then I just place a few pins around the skirt, just securing the fabric and the elastic in position. So that kind of guides me when I'm sewing. I can kind of pull between the pins and know that I'm keeping that fabric evenly distributed around the waistband. Once you finish top stitching, give your waistband a really good press with lots of steam. And this is just going to finish your waistband really nicely and just make it fall in place really nicely. Congratulations, you just finished your Andi skirt. You took some raw materials and you turned them into something really beautiful and purposeful and full of love. You've sewn the Andi skirt with really high quality finishes, and you should be really proud of yourself. Thank you for being here and for sewing the Andi skirt, and I hope that you've had a beautiful experience. Now we'll be walking through the steps of sewing the traditional waistband. Lay the traditional waistband panel over the elastic waistband panel with right sides facing. Pin the side edges together. Using a straight stitch, sew down these side seams with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press the seams flat down the center. Press the top edge of the waistband towards the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch. Press the bottom edge of the waistband towards the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch, and press in half to create a center guideline. We now want to sew 2 basting stitches across the top edge of the front skirt panel, 1/4 inch from the edge, and then the next 1/2 inch from the edge. If your fabric shows stitch holes really obviously, such as like a cotton poplin, then you probably want to sew your second basting stitch 3/8 of an inch from the edge instead. Gather the skirt panel until it is the same width as the front waistband panel. I like to do this by just gathering and making sure that they're the same width, and then I go through afterwards and evenly distribute those gathers. Unfold the top edge of the waistband and align this raw edge with the top raw edge of the skirt. The right side of the waistband should be facing the wrong side of the skirt. Pin in place. Also make sure that you are aligning the traditional waistband to the front of the skirt and the elastic waistband to the back of the skirt. Using a straight stitch, sew together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam towards the waistband. Fold the waistband over towards the right side of the skirt. You can do this using that previously pressed center guideline of the waistband. And as you can see, we've already previously pressed the edge of our waistband in by 1/2 an inch. So you want to align that previously folded edge so it sits just over the previous stitch line that you've sewn. You don't want that stitch line to be visible from the right side of the skirt. So just make sure that you place that waistband just over that stitch line so you can no longer see it, and pin this in place. Starting at one of the side seams, using a straight stitch, sew the front waistband in place as close to the edge as possible. You can use a top stitching thread here if you want to. I prefer to just use my all-purpose thread that matches my fabric. And you want to sew as close to the edge as possible. That's really going to help you to get a really beautiful finish here. I just encourage you at this step to just take it really slow, sew really slowly and accurately, and just try to get as close to that edge as possible. Stop sewing once you reach the other side seam. Using a straight stitch, now sew along the back of the waistband, leaving a 2-inch opening before each of the side seams. And these openings are going to allow us to thread our elastic through the back. Locate your elastic and attach your preferred tool that you like to use to thread elastic through casings, and you want to attach them to both ends of the elastic. Thread the elastic through one opening until you reach the other opening. Make sure that your elastic is pulled through enough that it can reach just past that side seam. Through the opening, remove the tool that you've used to thread that elastic through on that end. Place the elastic back into the waistband tunnel and make sure that it's sitting just beyond that side seam. Pin this in place and sew the elastic in place by stitching in the ditch. If you haven't stitched in the ditch before, it just means that you're sewing over a previous stitch line that you've sewn, so it essentially becomes invisible within that stitch line. So that's what we're doing here. Repeat this with the other end of the elastic and side seam so that the back elastic is secured in place on both sides. When you're securing this other side of the elastic, just make sure that your elastic isn't twisted in the casing. After this step is a great time to try on your skirt and make sure that your elastic is fitting as desired. Keep in mind that top stitching on your elastic is also going to expand and stretch it out a little bit. So both of your 2-inch openings close now using a straight stitch. And we are up to top stitching the waistband. If you would prefer not to top stitch your waistband, then you have completed your Andi skirt. Well done. If you do want to top stitch the waistband, then I recommend one of the following options. One would be top stitching 1/4 of an inch from the top and 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the waistband. The second option is to top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the top and 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the waistband, and then additionally top stitching along the center of the waistband. When you're top stitching the waistband, you need to stretch that elastic out when top stitching so that you don't lose the elastic nature of the waistband. And what I like to do is just before I begin my stitching on the elastic, I just make sure that the elastic and fabric is evenly distributed, and then I just place a few pins around the skirt, just securing the fabric and the elastic in position. So that kind of guides me when I'm sewing. I can kind of pull between the pins and know that I'm keeping that fabric evenly distributed around the waistband. Once you have completed your top stitching, last thing to do is just press that waistband with lots of steam, and that is just going to make your waistband fall in place really nicely. Congratulations, you've just finished your Andi skirt. You just took some raw materials and you turned them into something beautiful, purposeful, and full of love. You've completed this skirt that has really beautiful, high quality finishes, and it's not a quick sew. It requires a lot of patience and slow sewing and intention. So congratulations. I hope you love this skirt, and I hope you've really enjoyed the experience and process sewing the Andi skirt. Thank you for following along this video tutorial. I would love to see your Andi skirt, so tag us in your make over at Instagram using the hashtag Andi skirt and tagging the ordinary folk. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in an upcoming pattern.